Welcome, everybody. Today is Sunday, December 31st, 2017, and we are gathered here, Jörg Glismann and I, for another reading and discussion of the book Codeword Barbelon, Danger in the Vatican, the Sons of Loyola and Their Plans for World Domination. So, Jörg, how are you doing over there?
Well, I'm still fine as I was for the last reading, which was just half an hour before ended, because we are doing 2 readings in one day. Because I feel a little guilty.
Ah,
we have read about half a page of new material in the last hour, so
yeah,
I think we have to we owe it to our subscribers to get a little bit more reading done. And
please. I'm all ears.
I'm looking forward to get through this subject of the gunpowder plot, because there are not so many people who are aware of it. There are even
Yes.
less people who are aware of the Spanish Armada being a plot of the Pope with the King of Spain to bring Great
Mm-hmm.
Britain back under the yoke of Rome. And
Mm-hmm.
that was the same intention with the gunpowder plot. You know, there were, as we read in the last video, we read the affidavit, I think you can say, the
Mm-hmm.
verbatim record of Guy Fawkes, how he
Mm-hmm.
was made familiar with the gunpowder plot and what the reason for that was. And there are I lost a little bit my train of thoughts, but
Mm-hmm.
this workings of the Jesuits were working then, even before the gunpowder plot, after the gunpowder plot, and even working today. And we have to get the people's attention to that stuff. And you know, people who seem on the outside so nice are on the inside just devils. And Jesus Christ made a wonderful speech on that when he once said, outside you are polished cups, and on the inside you're nothing but dead bones, something in that regard
Yes,
that he said.
that's right. Matthew 23. Yep.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and that is
That's right.
100% fitting to for the Jesuits. Now,
Yes.
without any further ado, we already talked a lot of other things in the last broadcast, which of course nobody knows who has not listened to that. So I can only advise you, go to, I don't know, Bret, did you make a playlist on your channel, Codeword Barbelon, where people can follow all the
Ah,
readings yet?
thank you for getting on my case. No, I have not.
So
Okay, yeah, I can do that.
so then
Absolutely.
people can go to the playlist called Codeword Barbelon. I guess that's the way you will call it. I will call it Codeword Barbelon on my
Yes.
channel, Juggler66. And when you go
Yes.
to the playlist with that name, you will find all videos that were produced during this book reading in chronological order, and you can watch them one by one. And I don't know if Bret makes use of this end signs that you can do in the last 20 seconds or 30 seconds of a video, where you can promote other videos and other channels. I always do that, and there will also always put the playlist in there, so when you come to the end of this video and you click on this picture that opens in the picture that you are seeing, with the playlist of the
Excuse me.
Codeword Barbelon, that opens up, and you will have the whole playlist, and you are of course able to take that playlist to your own YouTube channel and save it there. And then you are probably also always updated when there are new videos published by that. So maybe that's an interesting knowledge for you, an interesting information for you to get, how you can follow our readings. And then when you miss one and we refer to another reading, then you can go back in the archives and look it up for yourselves, that you don't miss anything. So we have come to chapter 4 in the book Codeword Barbelon, which is called Confessions and Trial of Henry Garnet, Society of Jesus, Doctor of the 5 Ds, compiled from original documents. This is very important that we understand this. It says in the footnote here, the trial notes from the gunpowder plot. See William Camden, so he was the author of that, Actio in Henricum Garnettum. This is actually Latin, Action in Henricum Garnettum, 1607, a true and perfect relation of the proceedings at the several arraignments of the late most barbarous traitors in 1606, translated by Dana F. Sutton, the University of California, Irvine, edited by Donald Carswell, and so on and so on. This is where you can find the original publication of this Confession and Trial of Henry Garnet, and Henry Garnet was the superior Jesuit in the United Kingdom at that time, in England at that time. He was not the superior general of the society, but he was what we call today the provincial of that island. He was a very high-ranking Jesuit, and he was the one who pulled the strings from the back. But before I will tell you anything that we're going to read about, I'm just going to keep to the book. That starts here with a very interesting saying, a proverb. Of course, again, it is in Latin. It said, "Qui tacet consentit," and this means in English, "He who is silent consents." The Jesuits be not only a subtle society, but also an audacious sort of people, fearing no punishment, no, not the halter itself, which is the gallows, the halter. I'm going to start reading now, and Bret, whenever you want to have a saying in this, you want to make a comment, then just say comment and I will interrupt. And for the rest, of course, I appreciate your input also. And now let's go into the Confessions and Trial of the Society of Jesus Superior of England at that time, Henry Garnet, and his role in the Gunpowder Plot of 1605. Let us take our seats in the London courthouse and follow with the other members of the public the proceedings and evidence of the trial of Henry Garnet, Society of Jesus, a man multorum monimum, means a man of many names, but none good. He is a man of many names, of which none is good. It is now Friday, March 28, 1606, and Henry Garnet is arraigned for trial at Guildhall before the Law Commissioner specially appointed for that purpose, namely Lord Admiral Earl of Nottingham, who already was part of the commission that we read when we read the verbatim record of Guy Fawkes. There also the Earl of Nottingham, who is Lord Admiral, was present. Then the Earl of Salisbury, Lord Chamberlain, Earl of Suffolk, the Earl of Devonshire, Lord Chief Justice John Popham, and the Earl of Worcester, attended by the Lord Recorder of London. All these people that I just named are the same people who were on the same trial commission that were present at the affidavit that we read last broadcast about on Guy Fawkes. Garnet is the Jesuit superior of the Society of Jesus in England, so he is not the general superior of the Society of Jesus, but he is the Jesuit superior of the Society of Jesus. Today we call this a provincial. This is the same position that Antichrist Pope Francis was having in South America when he was in Argentina for the last 20 years. He was in power there. He had previously, and this is Garnet, not Pope Francis of course, he had previously been professor of philosophy and Hebrew at the Roman College of St. Ignatius, Rome. The evidence presented in this chapter about Garnet's trial is taken directly from official transcripts in pertinent part, which was as follows. The prosecutor at Father Garnet's criminal trial is the famous legal mind, the Attorney General Sir Edward Coke, who read the following charges brought by the Crown. Quote, Henry Garnet had conspired with Robert Gadsby to withdraw the hearts of the subjects from their due obedience to God and their king first, to deprive the king of his crown, secondly, to murder the king, the queen, and the prince, thirdly, to stir rebellion and sedition in the kingdom, fourthly, to bring a miserable destruction amongst the subjects. And the subjects, this means the normal people, the people of England. Fifthly, to change, alter, and subvert the religion here established. Sixthly, to ruinate the state of the Commonwealth, and to bring in strangers to invade it, referring to the plan for a Spanish invasion. Yes, you have to know, in the background of the gunpowder plot, the Spanish Armada, which was defeated a few years before in 1588, was again in the starting blocks to invade England after a successful gunpowder plot to make sure that a Catholic government now could take over and the Protestant government would be abolished for all times. There was much more planning involved than the normal man sees. It was not just blowing up Parliament. There was a real Catholic and enemy takeover planned of the whole island of United Kingdom at that time. But it continues here that whereas Henry Garnet, superior of the Jesuits within the realm of England, alias Whalley, Darcy, Roberts, Farmer and Henry Phillips, in open rebellion and insurrection against His Majesty, against our said sovereign Lord the King, did treacherously meet and assemble themselves together. And being so met, they the said Henry Garnet, Oswald Tesmond, John Gerard, with Robert Catesby, and other Jesuits did maliciously, falsely, and treacherously move and persuade that our said sovereign Lord the King, the nobility, clergy, and whole commonalty of the realm of England, Papists excepted, were heretics, and that all heretics were accursed and excommunicated, and that none heretic could be a king, but that it was lawful and meritorious to kill our said sovereign Lord the King and all other heretics within this realm of England, did not conclude and agree with gunpowder, as it were with one blast, suddenly, treacherously, and barbarously to blow up and tear in pieces our said sovereign Lord the King. Tear in pieces our said sovereign Lord the King. Unquote. To every one of these charges Garnet pled or pleads not guilty. Yeah?
Yep.
You see, when we are reading here in the latter part that I just read to you, all heretics were accursed and excommunicated, that none heretic could be a king, but that it was lawful and meritorious to kill our said sovereign Lord the King. This is directly taken out of the oath of the Jesuits, INRI, Iustrum Necker Regis Impius. Look it up for yourself. We spoke about that in the past. And here we are in the paper that is read by the persecutor, brought by the crown to the trial of Henry Garnet, actually quoted, not verbatim, but quoted out of the constitutions, I'd even like to say, out of the Sacra Monita, I'd even like to say, out of the oath of the Jesuits, INRI, Iustrum Necker Regis Impius. Yeah? These four words that you can look up, which mean that it is just to kill a heretical king in the position. And that is what the Jesuits deal all about. Having taken the oath to tell the truth, Garnet is asked by Lord Northampton why he did not previously reveal matters that subsequently tended to prove his collaboration with the gunpowder plotters. To which Garnet answers, quote, "When one is asked a question before a magistrate, he is not bound to answer before some witnesses be produced against him." Unquote. And he repeats, and he also says in Latin, "Quia nemo tenetur prodere scipsum," means because nobody is bound to betray himself, he says. Garnet then tells the court that the Pope, by his bulls, had forbidden all Catholics from obeying or protecting the life of any ruler who was a heretic, or not obedient to the Church of Rome, and being not obedient to the Church of Rome automatically makes you a heretic. The Earl of Salisbury then asks, quote, Master Garnet, give me but one argument that you were not consenting to, the gunpowder plot, that can hold in any indifferent or objective man's ear or sense besides your bare negative denial. But Garnet replies not a word, thereby showing his true mind. It is then put to Garnet, in excuse of letters written with your own hand about the procurement of means for the quicker execution so desperate an enterprise, blowing up the English Parliament, you answer that the persons were commanded in your letters, but not the plot. But Garnet is not able to say why he would write letters commanding the plotters and yet deny his support or involvement in the plot itself, other than that he commanded those who were involved in the plots, but not the plot itself. When pressed to say for what reason he concealed, quote, a project so pernicious both to prince and state, without revealing it either to the king himself or to his ministers subordinate, unquote, Garnet says that it was because of the duty imposed by the confessional, that he had to keep the seal of the confessional, to which the Earl of Salisbury responded, God forbid that matters of such weight should hang by feeble threats. Unquote. Asked if he had any other reason why he felt it just, lawful, or even good to him not to have revealed the murderous plot to the king or his ministers, Garnet replies that he had done and said more than was inquired, and that he had dealt plainly with them, meaning the court, but nevertheless that he was bound to keep the secrets given to him as a priest at confession, and, quote, to disclose nothing that he heard in the sacramental confession, unquote. This is what they do. They hide behind the confessional. And when you want to understand what the confession really is all about, I advise you to get the book from Charles Chiniquy, The Priest, the Woman, and the Confessional, and your eyes will be opened to this subject even more. When you understand this, then come back and read this part on page 47 on Codeword Barbelon, and you will gain a greater understanding. Whereupon the Earl of Nottingham asks him if someone were to confess this day to him that tomorrow morning he meant to kill the king with a dagger, must be concealed by Catholic law, whereunto Garnet answers that he must conceal it. We interrupt Garnet's evidence here to observe the following pertinent facts. Firstly, that it was the Jesuits who made confession a religious dogma of Rome, compulsory for all Roman Catholics. The importance of the confessional in the Jesuits' arsenal is summed up by historian Edmond Paris as follows. And Edmond Paris, you know, is the author of the book, among others, The Secret History of the Jesuits, which I am reading in English at this moment. I don't know whenever I will publish that, but I have done 13 readings so far, and in English, and I completed the complete book in German. But Edmond Paris is really an authority in the history of the Jesuits. And
oh yes, and Jörg, I'll just quick interrupt because I have the first part published on my channel there of the reading you did on the secret history of the Jesuits, which is fantastic. Looking forward to more of those.
Yeah, thanks.
You bet.
So Edmond Paris says the following quote: during the 16th century, when the Jesuits were formed, confession became a religious duty that was required to be diligently observed, unquote. And it was, quote, through the confessional the Jesuits secured lasting political influence. And that is taken from the book on page 34 and page 63. I read these parts already of the book in my reading. Paris tells us in his secret history of the Jesuits that, quote, the main two weapons used by Loyola's order were 1. To be the confessors of the mighty and those in high places, and 2. to be the educators of their children, unquote. Again, this is taken from page 27 of the book. The first is still one of the chief means, so that's the confession, by which they, the Jesuits, obtain intelligence and organize their great schemes. But more on that later, P.D. Stuart says, and I also don't go into a long comment here because this is a completely own broadcast of itself if I want to go into this. I only want to share with you this. The confession and the confessional box was the means of gathering intelligence during the quote-unquote Middle Ages. Today, nobody, in comparison to at that time, goes into church anymore, goes into the confessional box anymore, and confesses his sins to a priest, who can then, of course, use that information. Garnett says that he is bound not to use it, but when you know the Jesuit oath, which states the end justifies the means, he has always mental reservation to use it whenever he sees fit. The point that I want to make about people not going to the churches in that masses anymore, masses I mean with masses of people, not the mass. The masses of the people don't attend the mass anymore, to use that word twice. They had to look for different possibilities to gather their information today. And that is why our privacy rights that have been given by man now revokes. You can open the Bible in Genesis and open it and close it at Revelation and read everything between it, but there is never a moment when God gives man rights. He gives us ordinances, he gives us rules, he gives us laws, he gives us regulations. We are not given any rights. Human rights are given by man, by quote-unquote humanity. And those rights can be revoked also if the people don't like it anymore. The point that I want to make is, we are losing our quote-unquote rights more and more every day with censorship on YouTube and any other internet outlet. We are using our rights more and more because we have not the right to free assemble anymore as we had so many years ago. There are more and more restrictions put upon this, at least here in Europe, and I guess also over there in the United States of America. The right of free speech is revoked more and more because a lot of things that you can say now can be flagged as quote-unquote hate speech, and therefore you are not allowed to say those things anymore. I mean, you get the picture. You are not dumb like the normal man, I would say, without insulting anybody. But as a Christian probably listening to this program, you are much more aware of this than the average John Doe on the street. My point being, with this new technology that they have to, at every moment, control the cell phones, the iPods, and all the other electronic equipment we carry with us or that we have at home, by controlling our computers, especially through programs like Windows 10 and all that stuff, when they have total surveillance of every data that we use on the computer, they read every mail, they check every word we speak and every word we read and every website we go on. This is their information gathering today. This is why the NSA is building in Utah this huge place with this new huge quantum or whatever computer to store up all that information. That is the new confessional. You are confessing without even knowing it, without being aware of it. That is the difference between a few hundred years back, the time that we are reading of this confession, if I can call it that, of the confession and of the trial of Henry Garnett, and the time that we have today. They are looking for different methods, but they need the same information, and they get the same information. And today, they even have a deeper information on all of us than probably we have ourselves. I'm sure that the NSA knows more about me than I know about myself. And probably more about you also, Bret. And the people who are listening.
Yeah.
And we have to be aware of that. You know, and
Yep,
some people
that's
say,
right.
"Oh, I have nothing to to hide." Yeah, you still have something to hide. Everybody loves his privacy once in a while, at least when you're in the bathroom.
No doubt.
Let me go. Let
That's
me
right.
take it that far, if you
Yep.
understand what I mean. And the point being is that with all these new features and technical appliances and everything that they have and the power that they are given, the state can assemble all that information that is needed for the knowledge of the church, because the state is a servant of the church. The spiritual power rules above the temporal power. That is the dogma of Roman Catholic canon law. That is in all countries where there is a concordat. Go to the site Concordat Watch and see if your country has a concordat with the Pope, at least official. And if not official, then do your own research if maybe they have an unofficial or unofficial concordat. Okay? That's really something that I wanted to say about this confession, because we have to understand that the confession in the times that we are talking about here, we are speaking about the beginning of the 17th century and also the 16th century when the Jesuits were formed. We are speaking about the importance of the confessional. Why is the confessional today not important anymore? Well, because they have all these other means today which give them at least the same, if not even much deeper information about the persons they want to shadow. Any comment from you, Bret, or shall I continue the reading?
Please continue.
It must further be noted that the defense upon which Garnett seeks to rely is based on a falsehood. For the seal of confession is subject to Canon 21 of the Fourth Lateran Council in 1215, binding on the whole Church, which lays down the obligation of secrecy in the following words, quote, "Let the priest absolutely beware that he does not by word or sign or by any manner whatever in any way betray the sinner, but if he should happen to need wiser counsel, let him cautiously seek the same without any mention of person." Unquote. Thus Garnet, as a Catholic priest, even by the standards of the twisted Jesuit moral theology of the Fourth Lateran Council, was obliged by Canon 21 to seek wiser counsel cautiously without any mention of Garnet. But by all normal human standards of morality he was required to do even more than that, even if by private or anonymous means he was morally obliged to at least warn of the plot. And again, no, he has mental reservation because of his Jesuit oath that the end justifies the means, that if the end is good, all means to achieve this end are good. And what is good? That the Church, the Roman Catholic Church in this case, in the end is the winner, is the gainer of the action. And because of this mental reservation, he could easily betray Canon 21 of the Fourth Lateran Council in 1215. According to Jesuit scholar Cardinal Robert Bellarmine, P.D. Stuart continues here, quote, "If the person confessing be concealed, it is lawful for a priest to break the seal of confession in order to avert a great calamity." Unquote. But more damningly, the Jesuits had themselves previously pronounced a doctrine that there are circumstances in which the confessor, i.e. the priest hearing the confession, may oblige his penitent to discover or disclose his accomplices, or permit him, the priest, to inform the competent authorities of the crime. Unquote. Even more conclusive is the fact that the details concerning the treasonous plot were also revealed to Garnet, as he himself admitted, by Catesby and the Jesuit Greenwell, both of whom conferred with him thereupon in the presence and bearing of other parties, and not just in the confessional. In any event, as Lord Chelmsford, a previous Lord Chancellor, observed, the law was clear. A Catholic priest had no privilege at all to withhold such facts which came under his knowledge in confession. And the English judge Lord Westbury had previously confirmed in R.V. Constance, Kent, quote, "There can be no doubt that in a suit or criminal proceeding a clergyman is not privileged so as to decline to answer a question which is to put to him for the purposes of justice, on the ground that his answer would reveal something that he had known in confession. He is compelled to answer such a question, and the law of England does not even extend the privilege of refusing to answer to Roman Catholic clergymen in dealing with a person of their own persuasion." Unquote. So Garnet had no excuse under canon law, he had no excuse under moral law, he had no excuse under common law or Jesuit law. Huh. Yeah, under Jesuit law he had. We were just discussing that mental reservation. He is therefore condemned ipso jure by their own law. Garnet lied when claimed to have only known of the plan of Guy Fawkes, an explosives expert who had served with the Spanish army, through the confessional. The evidence proved his extensive involvement with the plot, his knowledge of it both in and out of confession, and his influential and active collaboration with all the conspirators. In fact, the philosopher Voltaire, by the way, also Jesuit educated, remind you, the philosopher Voltaire confides that, quote, "whenever a Prince of Orange or a King of France was to be assassinated," Prince of Orange, that refers to the later king, the husband of Queen Mary in the end of the 17th century, after the glorious revolution in the United Kingdom, when the Prince of Orange was coming over from Holland, from the Netherlands, and set on the crown of England at that time. That's why Voltaire here makes the connection to the Prince of Orange or a King of France was to be assassinated, because the Prince of Orange was a Protestant and the King of France also. There were a few Protestant kings in there. The Jesuit assassin, quote, "always prepared himself by the sacrament of confession," unquote, and he adds sarcastically that the Jesuit assassins used confessions, quote, "as gluttons take medicines to increase their appetite," unquote. Notable examples being the lawyer Balthazar Gerard, alias or also known as Francis Guyon, the assassin of William I, Prince of Orange, and of course Ravaillac, who assassinated King Henry IV. King Henry IV, is he not the one? Isn't he the one, I think, who invoked, not evoked, but invoked, who made sure of the Edict of Nantes? I'm quite sure. And Ravaillac was the one who killed him. But don't nail me on that. I think that was Henry IV of France in the 1598, who invoked the Edict of Nantes, which gave the Huguenots, the Protestants of France, religious liberty and peace from persecution at that time. This most illustrious prince of Europe was stabbed in his carriage on narrow Rue de la Ferronnerie. Like the above assassins, Guy Fawkes and his conspirators all took secret oaths and received the sacrament of the Eucharist of the Church in preparation for the plot involving the said Henry Garnet, John Gerard, Oswald Tesmond, and other Jesuits. Coming back to Garnet's trial. Shortly before shortly before the said grand opening of Parliament on November 5th, 1605, the date the plotters intended to blow it up, Garnet organized a pilgrimage to St. Winifred's Well in Wales, which started from Sir Everard Digby's house in Buckinghamshire and stopped on its way at the houses of John Grant and Robert Winter, three of the main conspirators. Moreover, during the pilgrimage, Garnet asked the company of pilgrims to pray, quote, for some good success for the Catholic cause at the beginning of Parliament, unquote. That Garnet was privy is not a party, if not a party to the murderous powder plot, is ipso facto. Thus we are left to wonder when Garnet denied direct involvement in the plot. Was he denying involvement as Garnet, as Whalley, as Darty, as Roberts, as Farmers, or as Phillips? For he was a man of many names. Maybe he denied the allegations as Raleigh or perhaps as Farmer because, according to their doctrine of equivocation, such deceptions are lawful. Here, P.D. Stuart speaks of the mental reservation, the doctrine of equivocation. It's the same. And I'm not even a native English speaker, and I get
that. Excellent.
Indeed, why else would a man of Garnet's stature, meaning the head of the English Jesuits and professor of philosophy and Hebrew, have so many names but for the purpose of equivocation, means deception? Interestingly, when fellow Jesuit Francis Tresham, one of the Gunpowder Plot conspirators, or co-conspirators, an Oxford University educated Catholic, was arrested on the 5th of December, a book was found amongst his papers, a copy of Blackwell's Treatise of Equivocation, and importantly, it contained margin notes in Garnet's own handwriting. Bang! There you got it. Today we say caught with a hand in the cookie jar, right?
Yeah. Wow.
When the Recorder of London asks him pointedly whether he only knew of the plot through the confessional box, Garnet admits to the court that he had previously confirmed in his own handwriting that the Jesuit Greenway told him of the powder treason not as a fault or sin confessed, but as a thing of which he, Mr. Greenway, had knowledge of, and which the latter told to Garnet by way of consultation and not through the confessional box. When this fact is so put to him, Garnet merely replies that whatsoever was written under his hand was true. Thus, Garnet admitted his privity to the plot, apart from the confessional, which facts he attested to with his own hand and admitted to at his trial. In any event, as they say in Latin, qui tacet consentit means he who is silent consents. The back of Garnet's main defense is thus broken. Garnet is next asked whether he was made aware of plans to raise money for any army from Spain, which was to be in readiness once the Parliament and Sovereign had been killed in the explosion. That he readily admits to, but the wretch denies that he knew for what purpose the army would be used. This army the Jesuit plotters had procured to invade England immediately after the gunpowder had blown up Parliament, leaving a defenseless and mourning England at the mercy of their wretched enterprise. But although Garnet initially denies that he knew for what purpose the army would be used, he afterwards, being demanded to speak the truth and having certain evidence presented against him, affirms and confesses that he knew beforehand of the sending to Spain for an army to carry out an invasion. Asked why he did not reveal this to the authorities, he answers, I did conceal it after the example of Christ, who commands us to rebuke a brother in secret and not reveal his sins openly. What a slander against the memory of Christ, eh? Upon what subject will these Jesuits not dissemble and equivocate? Garnett's imitation of Christ, for the most part, comes well short of the pattern of the but in the imitation of evil, he all but exceeds the example given by Christ's adversary. In Garnet, we see evidenced the usual fortitude of a quote-unquote martyr, a martyr after the Ignatian model. I made a little star here, and I don't know why anymore, because I probably took a note on this when I was reading this for the first time.
Yeah,
This is on
I
page
would
51.
imagine.
Yeah, the Ignatian model. Yeah, okay. That's because
Mhm.
that's a very important little sentence that we read here. In Garnet, we see evidenced the usual fortitude of a quote-unquote martyr after the Ignatian model. You know, you have the martyr of an Ignatian model on the one hand, and you have a martyr in the biblical sense on the other hand. And this is probably why I made this little note here on the side.
Mhm.
The word martyr has to be used in the right way. And if you want to learn anything about martyrs and saints, I advise you to go to my reading, All Roads Lead to Rome, where there is a whole chapter called Martyrs or Saints, question mark, I think it was,
Mhm.
where Jörg, deal, not ideal, I deal with the subject of martyrs and saints, and that actually the martyrs of the Roman Catholic Church are no saints in the biblical sense, but are traitors and satanic, probably evil, devil, demonic possessed people who work for the agenda of Satan himself. The martyrs of the Roman Catholic Church are not martyrs in the biblical sense. In the biblical sense, you are a martyr when you die for Jesus Christ, as he died for you. And Jesus Christ himself said that that is the greatest proof of love you can give, to die for your friend. So, in Garnet we see evidenced the usual fortitude of a martyr after the Ignatian model, not a martyr in the sense that a Bible-believing Christian understands the word. Still no comment, Bret?
Oh no, yeah, I'm just soaking it up, man. It's good. Yep.
Now, at the close of the court's inquiries, Lord Northampton, quite incensed, says to Garnet, quote, For though you pretend to have received a deep wound in conscience at the first revealing of the plot, and to have lost your sleep with vexation of spirit, to have offered and prayed to God for his preventing grace, yet all this while you suffered the project to proceed, you helped and assisted their endeavors that were laborers, you wrote earnest letters to both Baldwin and Creswell, and also to Fawkes, for their furtherance of ordinary means. You gave orders for a prayer to be said by Catholics for their prosperous success. Unquote. Says Lord Hampton, continuing his address to Garnet, quote, While you, Garnet, pretended to have broken both your sleeps and your brains, i.e., what to do with the information he had about the plot, it may be that your mind was perplexed and disquieted upon the meditation of strange events, for so was the mind of Cain, Achitophel, and Judas that betrayed his master. The more your labor to get you out of the wood, referring to Garnet's attempts to extricate himself, the further you creep in. Unquote. But Garnet offers no reply other than to repeat that what he had already said about the seal of the confessional, retreating to which we uncovered already as a lie. The evidence concluded. The Attorney General, Sir Edward Coke, in his closing address says of Garnet, quote, "He is a doctor of the Jesuits, that is, a doctor of the 5 DDs, that is, dissimulation, deposing of princes, disposing of kingdoms, daunting and deterring of subjects, and destruction. Those are the 5 Ds." Again, he is a doctor of dissimulation, deposing of princes, disposing of kingdoms, daunting and deterring of subjects, and destruction. The jury then retires to consider the evidence presented. Within less than a quarter of an hour they return with a decision. The English superior of the Jesuits, Henry Garnet, is found guilty by anonymous verdict. Having been found guilty of high treason, John Popham, the Earl of Suffolk and Lord Chief Justice, pronounces the sentence for treason on him. Garnet was to be hung. Garnet was to be drawn and quartered on May 3rd, 1606. And so on the said day he took his last breath in St. Paul's Churchyard, London, aged 51. In a letter dated May 2nd, 1606, the day before Garnet was hung, Sir Dudley Carleton mockingly prophesied, quote, "He, Garnet, will equivocate at the gallows, but he will be hanged without equivocation." Unquote. Indeed, Garnet's infamous Jesuitical equivocations were satirized by Shakespeare in his famous play Macbeth. In Act 2, Scene 1, Garnet is introduced by one of his allies, Farmer, in the play of Macbeth. Yeah? And therefore you have to understand the satire of the Jesuits themselves, because Shakespeare was only an actor. The real writer behind Shakespeare was probably Sir Francis Bacon, a Jesuit. Yeah? Shakespeare was just a figure, like Einstein was just a figure, just a Ponzi to play what he had been told. So when Shakespeare writes a play, Macbeth, and uses an alias of Garnet in the name of Farmer in Act 2, Scene 1, this is the Jesuits mocking us with their exterior, or with their not exterior, interior, with their secret knowledge, you know,
right,
when they play that right before our eyes, but give it, of course, another twist so that we would never understand the real meaning of it.
Oh, well, so we think it's fun and games, and oh, isn't that funny?
Yeah. Even if we were to believe that Father Garnet was not directly involved in the gunpowder plot, as it seems clear he was, he could not claim innocence, as the plot himself was but a fruit of the Jesuits' own doctrines and instructions, and drawn wholly out of their propositions and principles. Moreover, he wrote several letters, still Garnet, wrote several letters to the plotters giving moral support to their scheme, even calling upon Catholics to pray for its success. Significantly, 3 years earlier, in 1602, Garnet had received briefs from Pope Clement VIII directing that no person unfavorable to the Catholic religion should be allowed to succeed to the throne of England. Now, why is this very important? Queen Elizabeth I reigned until 1603, and then she gave over to James I of England, who was the 6th of Scotland, who was the target of the gunpowder plot. And while I'm at it, it is no coincidence that the gunpowder plot was planned in November 1605, just 1 year after that same King James starting the working groups that sat together, 6 groups of 9 people, scholars, who were to put an English Bible into being, what we call today the King James Bible. This committee was put together in 1604. That was one of the very first acts King James did. And therefore, to me, it is no wonder that the gunpowder plot then was planned for 1605, just 1 year later. The Jesuits have to, or they cease to exist, prevent the Word of God to come to the people. And they were planning that by blowing up the parliament, and when they take away the king and the Protestant government and they could install a Catholic government, the plans for the 1611 King James Bible would have been put into the grave. And we would be deprived today of the 1611 King James Bible. That are the consequences, and that is why this gunpowder plot is so important. Absolutely important to understand and to be completely understood with all its consequences by it. Any comment there, Bret?
Oh, yes. I mean, that is a very, very key part of history right there. And one of the reasons why we see so many of these types of quote-unquote entertainment being pushed on us right at this present moment is to completely wipe out any chance that there might be any Protestantism growing out there in the mainstream. They can't have that. No, by no means can they have any critical thinking in biblical terms. So they have to wipe it all out. The only way they can do that is to just thwart it all with this Jesuit crap.
Since they didn't succeed in killing King James, blowing up Parliament and establishing a Catholic government in England in 1605 with the gunpowder plot, and they couldn't prevent the publishing of the King James Bible in 1611, since then they took another approach, and instead of trying to prevent us to get to the Bible, they are just changing the Bibles. They put out so many corrupted versions that the normal man does not know anymore if he wants to turn to the Word of God which word to use. That's why Bret and I always advocate the 1611 King James Bible. You don't have to use that Bible, but we advise you to do it and make up your own mind. You don't have to listen to us, especially not when we teach anything like use this Bible or that or whatever. Make up your own mind. Do your own studies on this. But always keep in mind one very important point. Did you ever hear a discussion of a person who adheres to the NIV version of the Bible discussing any points with someone who is reading the NAV, the NAS, or the RSV, or the ESV, or any other corrupt Bibles? I never heard them attack each other, and even though all these Bibles are not in agreement, are not in accord, because they don't say the same things. Strange enough, everyone who is a proponent of all these corrupt Bibles always attacks one Bible. Yeah, the King James.
Yep, that's right.
And no other. A
That's
reader
right.
of the NIV will not attack a reader of the ESV, the NASB, the RSV, or whatever. But they will all attack the reader of the King James.
Oh, because it's the politically correct way to go about your faith. Just kill the whole history. You know, oh, well, history doesn't matter, see, because Jesus, you know, I don't know. It's so much what do we call this? Sophistical thinking. We're just flooded with it.
I'm gonna continue for a little bit in the book. I don't know how many minutes we are still recording here.
Oh yeah, 59 minutes we're in now. So.
Yeah, but that's not when we started the reading of the
Oh
book,
yeah,
right?
That's right.
So
very good, Jörg. Keep going.
A few minutes we still have left, so I want to continue until the middle of the next page. The reader may judge whether the following revelations by the English barrister Dr. David Jardine does not decide conclusively the guilt of the Jesuit Garnet and his order. This writer brings forward a most striking fact. He says that, quote, from the time of the kings, meaning James I, the King James Bible, James, accession, until within a fortnight of the 5th of November, Catesby and Garnet were found in constant confidential communication, unquote. Indeed, Jardine tells us that Catesby had been an accomplice with Garnet in 2 previous treason plots. Thus, in Garnet's guilty verdict, the consequences of his diabolical Jesuit doctrines and previous actions came home to roost. What is even more telling is the admission of the famous Cretan Jesuit Eudaemon Johannes. Strange name, I'm sorry. The Cretan, so that's from Crete, a Greek Jesuit, Eudaemon Johannes. In his defense of Garnet, Eudaemon wrote an apology in which he said that Garnet, quote, did not approve of the deed, but he liked the result that might have followed, unquote. What a statement! It's perhaps also a matter worthy of note that Garnet had come into England 20 years previous, July 1586, the very year another Catholic, Anthony Babington, was executed for involvement in a plot so to murder Queen Elizabeth I and free the Catholic pretender Mary Queen of Scots. The Babington plot. That was 2 years in anticipation of the great Catholic armada of Spain sent to invade and conquer England for the Pope. Now, dear reader, do all of these revelations not make your hair stand on the end of your back? As the lawyers say, res ipsa loquitur, the thing speaks for itself. To quote Northampton, quid facit in pectora humano lupi feritas, canis rebis serpentis venium, meaning, what works in the human breast the savagery of the wolf, the rabidness of the dog, the venom of the serpent? All found in the doctrines of the Jesuits. For when the conspirators doubted in themselves the lawfulness of the plots, they were reassured of its justice by the Jesuit Testament, who gave them full absolution of any sin and confined the same to Garnet. Truly, eye hath not seen, nor the ear of man heard, the likes of these things. What horrid animus of this from this synagogue of naughty men. As an aside, we note, too, that gunpowder is the invention of Berthold Schwarz, a German priest, who is also said to be the inventor of firearms. Why would a priest even think about creating gunpowder? There is no fitter conclusion to Garnet's trial than the words of the Earl of Salisbury. Quote, poor Henry Garnet might have undergone a more ordinary trial in some other place of less note and observation, but this opportunity was put into the king's hands, whereby there might be made visible to the world an anatomy of popish doctrine, from whence these treasons have their source and support. Popish doctrines lay on the basis of their treasons and their source of support. There is not a fitter stage for this exposure than the city of London. But Father Garnett's story did not end with his death. Relics and reminders of him were savored and passed secretly among his followers. Other Catholics acquired different parts of his apparel, which, according to the Jesuit Gerard, are now esteemed of more than their weight in gold. And Petrus Ribadeneira, in a book published with the approbation of the Pope, reckons Garnet, Southwell, Old Corn, and the other gunpowder traitors to be martyrs of the Jesuit Society, to be martyrs after the Ignatian model. Garnet has been given the aureole of martyrdom and is today regarded by his church as a saint. Yes, Saint Garnet of the Gunpowder Plot, a man of many names, multorum nominum, but of no good name. And you know, when the movie or the series of the Gunpowder Plot now is put out, why not make Guy Fawkes a saint too in the future? You know the wiles of the devil, eh? And I think this is a good moment to stop the reading of the book Codeword Barbelon today. What an insight we have gained into what all lies behind the Gunpowder Plot, a date we should remember, as it is said, remember, the 5th of November, the Gunpowder Plot, a day never to be forgot. We Bible-believing Christians should hold dates like this up high and quote-unquote celebrate them each year to remind the coming generations of the Jesuits' treasons all through history. Dear listener, Bret, thank you for the invitation. Until next time, I will for you leave the end notes of the ending comment of this video. Thank you very much for inviting me, and that we have done another session of this wonderful book reading, Codeword Barbelon. And until next time, Joggler66, Jörg from Hour of the Truth says God bless you and bye-bye.
Yes, very, very fitting, Jörg. Thank you very much for your commentary and your reading and discussion of this book today. I probably was a little bit more silent during this last passage here than I have been in a long time, but I will do that from time to time. It's just a matter of becoming more familiar with the history. It takes me in particular a little while to do that. I'm a little slow sometimes, but I'll catch up eventually here. But wonderful last comments there, Jörg, and very interesting going into the doctrines of the Jesuits here. And if anyone wishes to research these things more, I can suggest that they go to the Catholic Encyclopedia, look up some terms, and do some research on your own. You never know what you're going to find there. You know, just start using your critical thinking and question some things and look them up in the Bible too. Contrast them. So as always, Jörg and I both would absolutely applaud any of you to do your own research and to look into these matters further. And that's all we have time for today. Thanks for joining us, and I wish you a wonderful day and looking forward to the next reading and discussion we have here on the Gunpowder Plot. So very good, and I wish you a very blessed and happy day. Bye-bye for now.